Introduce myself. I'm 26 years old. I was born in Bavaria in a small city near Munich, and 3 years ago I moved to Berlin, which is my base. Since then, I also studied in Berlin. I studied history and Islamic science. I also had 2 years of Arabic classes. And after I finished school in 2010, I was always interested in photography. But in 2010, after I finished school, I was interested to actually work in an Arabic country after I have been to Israel in 2009, which was my first Middle East experience. And I wanted to see the other side of the border. So I saw that there is an English newspaper named the Daily Star in Lebanon, and this is the place where I had an internship as a writer and photographer for 3 months. And I think that was about that period of time when I finally realized that I would like to spend more time in the region and have a focus on the Middle East, because I love the culture, I love the people, and my curiosity grew to infinity. So I wanted to see more of the region. I wanted to learn more about the culture, the language, and so I decided to put myself out there in the field as a freelance photojournalist and develop stories in the Middle East. So after my internship in Lebanon, the Arab rebellion kicked off in all the countries like Tunisia and Egypt and so on. And in 2011, I wanted to produce my first story as a freelance photojournalist. I wanted to produce a photo essay about poor people in Cairo. I originally did not go to Cairo, to Egypt, for the reason of the revolution and all that stuff, because I know I was a beginner in the field. I didn't know a lot about freelance photojournalism, and I didn't have the contacts. So I went there and wanted to produce a story that has not been, covered by thousands of journalists before. So I went to Cairo and wanted to produce a story about the garbage collectors of Cairo, which was my first work. Which I produced, but in the end, of course, because it was a revolution, it was a political change going on in this country. It was just impossible to step back of that. It was you just happened to be in the flow of that, and of course, I was very interested in what was happening, and I was politically very interested. So I started to take pictures of what was going on in Egypt and the political change. So I went to a lot of demonstrations, of course, on Tahrir Square. And I took a lot of pictures of when the trial against Mubarak started. So there were a lot of people in front of the prison where he was held and where the court was based. And well, as you have probably heard from the news, that there was a lot going on in Cairo, and this country never actually came to peace. So it was quite a good time in the summer of 2011 to be in Egypt, because all the foreigners, the tourists, had gone, apart from the journalists. So this was a pretty good time for me to start as a freelance journalist, because it was very easy to make contacts, it was very easy to find stories that had to be revealed, and it was pretty easy to learn how to take pictures and to do journalism, although I never studied journalism. So I think this is a way that many other people like me, young people, have done as well. They started to go into these countries because it's very easy to go there, and they started to take pictures and to start doing their work without any proper training. So this is how I started my journalism in Egypt. This is how I experienced the summer of 2011, apart from the story about the poor people that I did, about the Christians, about the Coptic Christians. So if I speak too fast, or you have any questions, or if you have any trouble understanding me, please go ahead and ask me. So I saw a lot of demonstrations. Every weekend, every Friday, there was a big demonstration going on, a lot of people. And as I told you that there were a lot of other foreign journalists in the city, it was pretty easy for me to get in touch with them. And one of these journalists, he needed a photographer to go to Libya. So originally, I didn't even intend to go to Libya, but since this journalist asked me, and because I was very curious and it was a very exciting time for me, of course I said yes. So we went like instantly, because he had contacts on the border that we were in touch with. We went to the border one night, and it just so happens that we were suddenly in Libya, and in a country that I never planned to go in the first place, but in the end I did, and it was a very exciting time for me. This was my first, actually this was the first country I've been to where there was an actual war going on. So we spent a week there in total. It was my first experience in a conflict zone, and what I did, mostly because I didn't have the experience, I did not go to the front line and see all those dangerous places, because this was something I didn't have any experience in. I did not have insurance or a ballistic vest or helmet and all that stuff. So what I did was I sticked with the rebels, and I wanted to take pictures of these guys, what they do when they don't fight. So that's what I did in the week in Libya. Which was a hilarious week, by the way. These guys took care of everything. My colleague and me, we didn't have a clue what the currency exchange rate was, for example, but we didn't even need money, because these guys paid for everything, for accommodation, food, drivers. It was an amazing week. It was very exciting for me. I had no idea what I was about to do. So none of these guys were soldiers. They were just usual people, students, salesmen, for example. They worked maybe in an office or something like that. None of these guys were actually have been to an army. And it was so easy to do journalism there, because all those people, all these guys, they just saw foreigners, they saw journalists, and they wanted to tell their stories. They really wanted to shout out to the public, to say something, to have taken their picture. And it just happened to be an amazing time. And after a week, we left the country, and I went back to Egypt, and I stayed in Egypt for a couple of few more weeks. I finished my stories, and then I went home eventually. And my next experience in one of these countries heavily affected by the political change in the Arabic region was Syria, of course. So I went to Syria for the first time in October 2012, when it was still accessible to go there as a journalist. Afterwards, with all the Islamic State going on, it was pretty dangerous to go there, because they targeted foreign journalists and everything. But in 2012, it was still possible to go there. So this was my first trip to Syria. I've never seen Syria when I was in Lebanon. I should have done that, so I have never seen the country without a war, which is a pity in my opinion. But it was an amazing time as well. The Syrians are just the most amazing people. They really wanted to tell their stories. I think nowadays they're pretty tired of journalists, because they can see that nothing ever will change, but back then they still had hope, and they still were very heartwarming and welcoming to journalists. So since I'm freelance, I work for a variety of clients, but one of my clients includes a Berlin-based magazine here, which is called Zeitschrift für den Orient. They published a lot of stories. They published my work from Libya, my work from Egypt, my work from Syria as well. So what we did in Syria was we went to Aleppo, which back then in fall had been heavily affected by bombardments. So the souk had been burnt down, and we wandered around the city to see how heavily affected the old city of Aleppo was, and the souk. So this was a very exciting time for us. This was also the first time I got shot at. Me and my colleague got shot at in Syria for the first. Nothing happened in Libya. Libya was pretty safe in comparison to Syria, but unfortunately we made it out alive and unharmed. This is a photo that has been taken just moments after a mortar attack. So you could hear that there was shelling going on, and it was targeting the part of the city where we stayed in. And I think it was about 100 meters away. So we really took we took cover, and we really we were scared that something would eventually hit us. And it's not easy to see in the picture, I guess, but you can still see the dust on this guy's face and on the hair because there was some stone some dust has fallen off the building and it's still on his head. So this is the old city in Aleppo back in 2012. Of course, we've seen a lot of hospitals because you have to stick to the rebels. You can't go there freely. You always have to stick with someone. And for that reason, we also went to a hospital, of course. But despite the war and everything, they still had high spirits. These people really had hope they could win eventually. I think that is a time that is long gone by now. So after about 2 weeks, I left Syria, and I never returned because afterwards it got worse and worse, and I'm just not, I'm not experienced enough to go there again because people that are well more experienced than me have been captured and have been killed, and it's just not exactly my kind of my line of work because I'm not exactly a conflict photographer. I also worked in other regions. I just happened to be in a place where there is a political uprising, a conflict going on, but I don't focus on it. I happen to work I have a work on the Middle East, which happens to be a place with a lot of conflict, but that is not the place I do not seek places with conflict and war. That's what I mean. So, for example, I was in India by the beginning of the year, by the beginning of 2014, and I did a story about illegal coal mining in India. Unfortunately, this story remains unpublished. Nobody here in the market was interested to publish that story, which was a pity because I really wanted to publish it, and people tell me, you're a conflict journalist, you're maybe even a war photographer, but I tell them, no, I'm not. I do work like this, which is in peaceful times. There is no war going on, but there is a social issue. But it just happens to be that publishers are not interested in publishing these stories. So I did 3 weeks of research in northeastern India, where hundreds of thousands of people work in illegal coal mines. There is no supervision, there are no security conditions whatsoever. This boy is about 10 years old. So this is one of the downsides, one of the disadvantages of freelance journalism, because I do not have a contract with anybody, so nobody is obliged to buy or publish my stuff, which means I produce a lot of stories like these, which I'm especially interested in, but a lot of clients like newspapers and agencies are not, so they say, there is nothing interesting about this because it just happens to be that this is a place where children work since 100 years. This is something regular going on, so why should we publish it? So in summer of 2014, just a couple of months ago, I went to Mali because in Mali the German army has a training program for the Malian army. And I went there with a colleague, with a videographer, and we wanted to take a look at what it looks like when Germans train Malian soldiers to help this country get back on its feet, which was pretty interesting because this is a great country. We made great experiences, but the army is just so weak that at no point at all they will ever have the power to gain to gain enough power to have an army strong enough to protect their own borders. So this is like I was in Afghanistan in March. I visited the army, the German army, in March in Afghanistan. They also have a training mission there. So this was a pretty interesting visit to me because Germany has a political line which says we should be more involved in foreign places, also with army, with military forces. But when you're actually there, you see that this is just a huge waste of money, in my opinion. So you can see that, for example, the second soldier here in this picture, he's not even holding a gun, he's holding his fingers like this. For some reason, the stories we pulled out of Mali, we didn't only visit the German army, we also did a piece about the cultural heritage, because we've been to Timbuktu, for example. This was taken in Timbuktu. They have a lot of Islamic heritage. They're like old manuscripts, and they had to be brought to Bamako, to the capital, in order to protect it, because the Islamists were about to destroy it. So we asked ourselves, how much is left of the cultural heritage of this country? And we visited the Christian community, the Christian minorities. And this was a story that has been widely published. A lot of people were interested in that. I was pretty grateful that I found many people that published the story. And this is what I like to do. I like to find issues. I like to find stories that have not been covered by other journalists, but stories that have been that are untold. People that wanna speak about something that has not been told before. So this is just a small example of what my body of work looks like. The places I've been to. I didn't show you some pictures, like for example from Afghanistan, because it's just pictures that you have seen over and over from the German army training Afghan soldiers. This is nothing I would have to share with you, because you probably just seen it already. So as a last piece of work of my speech here, I would like to show you, because I was asked to show you the small movie that I brought from Libya, and this is actually the only movie that I finished editing. Also, it was never published. It was just a, how do I put this? It was just, I just tried to finish a video piece. So, this is it.
كتائب قذافي أموال الناس يجمعوا فيها وياخذوا فينا أموال الناس. ريت هم جايين هنا للصريغ. ريت هذا اللي كان قاعد هنا من الكتايب كان يسرق من الحواشين هذينا اسطوانات الغاز ويجمع فيهن هنا ويمشي يبيع فيهن. هذينا اسطوانات أهل بن جواد كلهم. لا جو تماما. تعال اطلع برا. حولك لا مواطن معلش كملوا بس. انت شايف ان المنطقه دي اكثر من مره تو نحن ماشيين. نصيحة والله نصيحة عائلات اليوم اطلعها من هذا. تبغى العلم. عدل صوتك في الشارع. يجيبوا لك حافلة. يسويك حاجة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. صورنا طمنا على الشياب جبنا في الجزيرة. تم ارفع الفرش سلم لي على الشياب. دار زنقة راسنا لوف طهرناها شبر دار بيت جليزة حمام حيطة أرض حيطة قصة منورين ثورة يا ظالم حياك يا زرتان. كلفت اهو. تعال شوف تعال شوف غنائم كذاب. انا ممنوع. اوكي تعال شوف.
Yes, thank you very much for showing us your film and having this great presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a lot of questions, so there will be only time for one. Is there anybody who has a really, really good question? Okay, now I probably put you under pressure a little bit. Somebody with a not so good question? Yes, Christian.
So maybe thanks first. Also thanks for your presentation. And what would you say? What are the two best advices that you would give somebody who wants to try this to do before he's going in this region?
To try what exactly?
How to prepare yourself as a freelance journalist?
I think what helped me a lot was I talked to a lot of other colleagues that had more experience than I did. So you should talk to them and ask for their advice. And what else? You should prepare yourself, of course, regarding the culture and the language of these people. So you have to have a certain idea what this region is about and what these people, how they think like, what they feel, and why they do what they do. Especially in conflict, you have to take care of that.